Let me just give a little preface here to what this is about. June, I have a bunch of arrowheads that collected in the fields around Danny Tyler in South Berlin over the years, and Danny Tyler collected, and I worked for Tyler Farm, and so she wanted me to do something for farming and the Tyler Farm back in the 50s, and so I thought, well, that's a good idea. Well, it got away from me. So pretty soon it evolved from this farm and that farm, the whole town, agricultural in Berlin, the evolution of the tipping point where we went from horses to, so anyway, it got kind of involved. So I would look at what I'm doing today. It's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more. If we could only, I hope to entice someone to maybe take and run with the ball from here, because I got in, it's really interesting. I had some families, this morning I went up to get some photos. They're on the living room floor, boxes out, going through all the family photos of the farm and everything else. So I've been, getting photos organized, and I had a lot of families going through their old attics and everything else looking for photos so I could have photos of agriculture. So there's a lot to be done, and so you go on, you find out, well, someone else had an idea. I bumped into James Wheeler down to Cordelia's farm there, and he had the same idea, and he showed me on his computer. This is what new kids can do today. I got all I can do to send an email, but he had a program where a map of the town and a timeline down here, and as you move the cursor across the timeline, things would pop up on the map where there were farms, and farms went out. I mean, it's incredible. So if we could put together, there should be something together so people could go on the Historical Commission site and look up agriculture in Berlin and see what went on, because we went through a tipping point in agriculture, and we're down at the tail end of it. There's nothing. I mean, Berlin was an agricultural community, and I'm going to explain that a little bit. And I'd be remiss and say, it took a lot of effort putting this all together, and I certainly thank the people who dug around for the photographs. But the real key to if this works out is Marty Miller. He put so many hours into it, and and he got incredible patience. Like, I gave him all these slides to put on a thumb drive. He put them all on and gave it to me, and I turned it on and deleted them all. So he went and did it again. He never swore at me, nothing. Just went and just did it. So, all right. So let's get going. We'll start off. Let me start off with this map. This map, I put together where these stars are is where I recall there being dairy farms. There's 22 there. In addition to that, I got thinking about it, and then you see this kind of sea-looking thing right there. It's a half moon, but anyway, that's a chicken farm. There were a lot of chicken farms. I can remember chicken houses, 2, and I think in one case 3 stories high, running more than 100 feet, big deal chickens. There was major operations. There was one in South Berlin. When you go by the post office and down the hill to the traffic circle, it was a diamond and not a circle when I was a kid. And that whole field to the right, where the driving range is, and said that was all chickens. There were these little, they must have been, I don't know if they were egg layers. I was just a kid, but anyway, that was all chickens. And they had a dairy farm there also. And then you go up Mansell, up where Rue's Garage is. There was a big chicken house there. That was a chicken operation. And so there were a couple other around that I'm sure people here will think of. And by the way, thought I'd make sure a few people like Skip Nelson and some of the others, I'm glad Easy's here, and people of my generation that can kind of embellish this a little bit and go into it a little bit more. Anyway, this is, in addition to that, a couple of things on this. There were turkey farms. If you go down Pleasant Street, take a right and go down Pleasant Street, when you get, before you start up the hill, that house up on the right, when I was a kid, it was a magnificent old house. I don't know if it was colonial or not, but it was very early. Huge, beautiful barn, cupola on it and everything else. And when you went by in the evening, the turkeys would roost. They put roosts up for the turkeys to get on. We didn't have coyotes in those days and bobcats to speak of, so there weren't that many predators. There were foxes and owls, but still, in order to protect the birds outside on roosts at night, they kept floodlights on them. I remember you drive by there, it looked like a snowbank on that whole bank on there, just turkeys. And the same thing down the 1790 farm. If you go down around the traffic circle, excuse me, head towards Hudson, take a right on Bridge Street, go out that way. That place on the left was the 1790 farm. And they had turkeys, and it was the same thing as you take a right on the Bridge Street, that whole area, I remember in the nighttime. Remember that, Skip?
Yeah, of course. And don't forget the sheep.
I'm working on that. Okay. See, that's why I invite them to remind me. So, and they had a lot of, and there were sheep farms. They had a lot of sheep at the 1790. Incidentally, Dan Plastridge up on Sawyer Hill, he had turkeys. Nutting up on Derby Road had sheep. And anyway, Berlin was, we had a mink farm in town. At the end of Allen Road, Mickey Linkowitz raised mink for fur. In fact, he was, they would use him when, in those days, you didn't have all this animal rights stuff. We treated animals the way they should be, and they were treated kindly and humanely and everything else. We didn't humanize them anyway. So if a horse got old and couldn't even move, you didn't hire a vet to inject chemicals into it. You called Mickey Linkowitz. And he came up and he killed the horse and butchered it up and fed it to the mink, made mink feed out of it. He allegedly killed over 300 horses in order to feed his mink during those years. But that was Berlin. That was agriculture in apple orchards. Oh my God, the whole hillside up here. I remember picking apples. We get out of school, 6th, 7th grade, 8th grade, get on our bikes, pedal up to the farm, pick up drops, 25 cents a box. There was all kinds of things going on. What kind of farm am I forgetting? Yeah, apple, peaches, and then there was, it's my understanding, and I don't know what era it was, quite a lot of asparagus was raised in town.
My dad had an acre.
Yeah, I remember your father raising it. And also hops back in the early 18th century, 19th century. We were apparently a major hop growing town. We exported a lot of hops. So we were really an agricultural community. But during my lifetime, Berlin went through, I would say, a tipping point in agriculture. Everything went along, probably since the Civil War and up to, not much changed. When I was a kid, Skip was a kid, and Edie was a kid, and a few others were kids in here one time, I guess. So they, but, you know, I can remember one farm, the Roseberry farm, for example, 100% horse and mule. And old Joel made a cut-down tractor out of an old truck. But Danny Tyler, where I grew up on the Tyler farm I'm going to talk about, he had 4 horses. And I grew up plowing and cultivating, spreading manure, picking up hay with Hagen with a team of horses out in the field. And we worked together on it. And that went. Amos Wheeler horses, Roseberry, Johnny Neitzel up on Boylston Road had horses. Yeah, so anyway, that was Berlin, and the tipping point is more or less, as I said, we went from kind of mules and horses, built up cut-down tractors into modern tractors. In fact, Bill Wheeler started Village Farm Supply and sold Case tractors back in the 50s, late 50s, and then more and more automation. One of the big changes was we used to shovel the gutters out into the manure spreader. Well, they came along with gutter cleaners, spoiled the fun. They take the gutter, would push all the manure out, up over, and drop it into a manure spreader. I mean, there was nothing to do. It was awful. What's that, Skip?
We were Chinamen. Who flung down?
Yeah, right, who flung tongue. And then we went from Louise Janda was brought up something the other day I was talking to her I hadn't thought of, but she's right. It kind of went in the 50s from, I remember, what'd you fertilize the field with? Organic fertilizer, manure. And then in the early 50s, and I'll get into it in one of these shows there, that they started getting into phosphate and chemical fertilizers. And I can remember, they didn't even have spreaders in those days. I remember Danny Tyler, he had like a 42 Ford pickup or something, and we'd get the bags, and I'd sit in the back, I'm a kid, and he'd shovel it, and boom, he'd drive along the field, and I'd throw the fertilizer out. I don't know how well it was spread, but, and that's the way you fertilize it, and it worked. So that was another turning point there. And another big thing in the milking, when we were kids, you first started, everything was in 40-quart jugs. And you milk your cows, you put them in a 40-quart jug, you pick the 40-quart jugs up and put them in the cooler of water. Well, the day picking that 40-quart jug up, you went from being a boy to a man. That was one of the things. And also being able to throw a bale of hay in a truck. Next year you could throw it up 2 years. Next year you could really throw it up. That was all part of growing up, and it was all part of farming. It was really, really fun. All right, let me see if I can get through this. So anyway, this is the map of Berlin, and these are the dairy farms and the turkey farms on there. And anyway, but the farm I'm going to talk about is, if I can keep track of the cursor, there it is the Tyler farm, which was down here, and that's kind of rough. I think he owned over 1,000 acres in town. Some of it was in Northborough. Do what? Good idea.
You folks might have known it as Spooky World for a while.
So anyway, this is the Assabet River and stuff, and this is that nice field across from where Spooky World was. And he owned up back down here, and then he also owned a piece up here on the Northborough-Berlin border. Barry Yeager bought that a few years ago, and then he sold it to the town, so it's conservation land now. And this oval, yeah, those are the sheep farms. That's Nutting on Derby, and this is 1790 farm here. But anyway, now, that is the farm in the 1980. Now that's how I remember it, only in a lot better shape. And this new addition on the house wasn't there. It was an old addition. I remember the kitchen, there was no running water. Well, the running water, there was a spring up back, and the water ran down into a cistern that was both in the shed and the kitchen. You had a dip stick. And you dip out and get your water, and that was the running water. But the water ran at least 200, 300 yards through a 3/4-inch lead pipe. So that lead pipe, I drank from that quite a bit.
That explains a lot about
But it does. But Danny always told about when he was a kid, they had a hired hand, and the guy in the morning, and it had a petcock on it, so he'd shut it off. He'd come in the morning, he'd turn it on, and he'd take a scoop of water and drink it. Well, that water sat in that lead pipe all night long. Then he told about, when I was there, it was running steady, so I got low dose, but he got a high dose. And he talked about how after a while he began to lose his hair, he began to go insane, and he eventually died. And they later on, decades later, when they knew what it was lead poisoning. The guy died of lead poisoning. He was high in hand. So here's a stink bug. So anyway, this what you'll see later on is the ice house over here, this little one. The corn crib. The one behind it is the ice house. Now that building set up there, and it had 2 walls that far apart, and it was stuffed with sawdust, all insulated. And there was a pond up back, which I'll show you a picture of, where they harvested the ice, and they'd bring it down and they'd store it in the ice house, and that's how they kept the milk and everything. Then this was the milking barn right here, and it didn't have an automatic gutter. It was up high. It was all wood, and I remember you pick the scuttle up and you'd take the shovel and push the manure down the scuttle so the whole cellar would fill up. Then come spring, you take the horse and the dump cart, shovel it in there, or the manure spreader, and off you'd go. And that was that situation. So that was a dairy barn. This big barn was the old dairy, the original, it was a horse barn, the 4-horse stalls in there, the heifer calf barn, the hay barn, and wagons were stored in there. And this was the silo. And then this was the house, obviously. So,
Before you change that, can I kick in a story?
make it quick. No, I'm just kidding. Skip and I go way back.
Back in the, I think, 4th grade, Walter and I tried to beat each other up. Neither one of us was. I'm Skip Charlie Nelson. I've lived in Berlin 83 years, so I'm one of them neighbors. Now, Walter's, I worked for Danny Tyler when I went to Starkwood School of Agriculture. I have a 6-year training in agriculture, and that's why I became a heavy equipment mechanic. Anyway, this is a little humor. Let me get this stupid thing so I can up there. Right out, it has to do with this evergreen tree right there. I used to go to Starkwood School of Agriculture Division of the University of Massachusetts, and I would come down to Berlin on the weekends so that I could earn $10 so I could exist at college for another week. Okay, and I worked for Dan Tyler. Now, everybody used to think Dan Tyler was kind of a crazy old goon. Okay, he wasn't. He had several college degrees. Now, I went to work one morning, it was about 15 below zero, and Dan told me a calf died here in the dairy barn. He said, put the calf in a gunny sack and take him out back and dig a hole. Now bear in mind the snow is about waist deep. Go out under that pine tree right there and dig a hole and bury the calf. Well, all the while I was getting the calf in the gunny sack, I was dead blasted, blurry-eyed wombat, son of a thuffin' thuckatash, old guy, what the hell does he know? It's 20 below zero, it's 2 feet of snow, how in the hell am I going to dig a hole in the ground? Hey, I'm 16, 17, 18 years old. Man, you know everything there is to know at that age. Okay? So I got my shovel and I got a pick and I dragged the calf through the snow out under that tree, brushed a little snow away, took my shovel, and I dug a hole into the ground, and I buried the calf. And I come back into the barn with my tail between my legs because I said, Mr. Tyler, how did you know that I could dig a hole out there? And Danford, who everybody thought was a canut, said, well, son, he says, that pine tree has a southern exposure. Snow is an insulator. Pine trees drop needles which turn into humus. They lay on the ground and they become an insulator. He says, with the snow and the humus on the ground, that ground never freezes because of its southern exposure. That's how I knew. Well, that lived with me for my whole life. Now, I was a heavy equipment mechanic, and I used to tell my drivers, when you park your trucks at night, park them with the bodies up, facing the eastern sun, the southern sun. And they'd call me in the morning and say, my truck won't go because my airlines are frozen. By the time I got wherever they were thawed out. All right? And that was so I had a lifelong lesson that I learned from Dan Tyler.
It's a good place to learn it.
Say again?
It's a good place to learn it from Danny Tyler.
I'll tell you, and we flung a lot of dung.
And you still are.
Hey, Walter, it's been almost 15 seconds since the last time I did that.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Skip. Great. Okay. This was probably in the 90s, close to 2000, maybe only 25 years ago. So you see how further deteriorated it was. This, by the way, between the milk barn and the ice house, that's where the old milk room was when we had the 40-quart jugs. And then it was, what was it, 1960s, they went to bulk tank, and that's what this addition was here, so pump it out. So prior to that, and there's the Tyler farm. That's James D. Tyler, that's Anna. And I assume this is Danny and his sister. I don't know which is which and how. I forgot whether he was older or his sister, but nevertheless, that's the Tyler family. There's Danny, probably about 1895, feeding a sheep out front. And there's the old house I was telling about where the cistern and in the water. And that's Danny. He went to Princeton University. He went to Harvard Business School, and very, very smart man. He studied anthropology at Princeton, and I could, yeah, and I swear he could smell an arrowhead. I'd be sitting on the horse going along, cultivating, he'd be walking, he'd say, whoa, God, he'd pick up an arrowhead. I'm telling you, it was uncanny. And then after anytime you harrowed the field or anything and it rained, boy, you could walk out and he picked up arrowheads, and he knew about them. And there he is. I forgot what year that. He ran for the legislature, but this is talks about it. I don't know if Beacon Hill Public Schools, Princeton University, Harvard Graduate School of Business, and so he was a very well educated. And he was like Thoreau. He did not care for technology, modern technology. He had 4 draft horses, and that's the way he liked. That's the family just having a picnic. That's just a typical out in the barnyard there, a chicken on top of the sheep. What would happen, they'd throw the grain out for the chickens and end up on top of the sheep, some of it, so the chicken hop on top of the sheep and eat. Now there's the corn crib out there, and you notice these tin pans here. That was to keep rodents, rats and mice from climbing up and getting into the grain. And that corn crib, when I was a kid, was completely equipped with every kind of corn processing equipment you could have, from the grinders, the deshellers, to the winnowers, to everything. And it was half full of old dried up corn. I'm talking the 1950s. Was another one. There's cat on top of the sheep. There's Anna again feeding sheep. This is just to tell the truth, I'm not sure if this was even taken in Berlin. I can't for the life of me place that field in that background. But anyway, that was in the Tyler photos. This would have been down probably across the field down there. I figured that's probably 1812, the Berlin Centennial Celebration, and that, I forget, that coach was from out west of Worcester, a town out there. But I assumed that was probably here for the 1912 Centennial. This is a stud that his father had that used to farm out. Terms are $10 at the time of service, $10 when the mare proves in foal. All mares not regularly returned shall be considered in foal. In other words, you can't call up and say, no, nothing happened and not paying. If you don't return, they're going to pay. Accidents to mares at owner's risk. And so it goes on. But so he had Majestic there, his stud Percheron. Now this is kind of interesting. There's the pond, and the spring where the lead pipe started was over here a little bit. But right now, if you went up there, have you ever been up to that, you know that, what's that, what's the name of it? Boundless Adventures up in there. You know where that is? You drive up that road. Well, that road, I wish this showed up a little better, goes right up, right behind those horses, and goes on up over into here. And this pond is so silted in and filled in, but in the 50s and 60s, you take a winter day and there'd be at least a dozen kids from South Berlin. South Berlin is over this hill about a mile, and we'd hike over with our skates and come down, and we'd have a skating party and a fire going. And you can see how open, I'm going to keep showing you these pictures. See how open that is? It's all grown up now. I think Berlin was pretty near 50% open fields. So people don't realize how open the land was in those days, but it's all wooded now. And anyway, and now this is directly across the street from the farm down on the Assabet River. Northbrook comes in right about where I'm sitting. The Assabet comes in from the right. But this is kind of interesting. What do you think they got boulders on top of that bridge for?
All the time, so we can help fall.
I know you know. That when I was a kid, I mean, there'd be 5 feet of water over where that bridge is right now. All those fields down in the middle would be flooded. That was before they built the flood control dams in Northborough and Berlin and up in Brewer Brook and everything else. So they skipped right. That was weighted down. But another thing again, notice how open this land is. I remember it just like that. I don't know who that is, but there's the tree, and the bridge is right in front, the other side of that tree. Northbrook, Assabet comes out of the woods and down around this way. Northbrook comes in from here. And that rock, we used to swim off of that rock and play in the river there. And anyway, that's just another shot to show you how open the land is. I remember this tree when I was a kid, and we would climb up on it, grab that limb, shinny up on it, climb up on it. Now I've been over there and I can locate it because I know where the rocks are, and there's hardly even a stub left there. It all fell in. But this is looking across, this is River Road right here. The farm buildings are right here, but again, all open over there, you see. This is up on the road looking down, and that's that oxbow in the river. It's all wooded now and grown up. I remember mowing this field over here. Anyway, I wish there were more cattle and stuff I could show you, but it was open land and a lot of, I wanted to point this out too. In the 50s and 60s, when we were kids, you know, the kids, you did everything. We built this cabin. I used to take Danny's horse and hay wagon, go down the sawmill, get a bunch of round edge, and we went out and we built this cabin out in the woods. That's the inside of it, bunks. That's 56. And that's, I used to take his wagon, the buckboard. I had a little junk route around town, pick up rubbish and go to the dump. But the point I'm making here is, what do kids do today? There's nothing to do. And they talk about, oh, the kids do, yeah. What can they do? They don't have anything. Skip and I could go work on farms. You could do anything. There were all kinds of places to work and do things. And we played baseball. And we had teams in town, and we might play in a budding town. Today, the kids, they take their ball teams to go out of state, play half a day's drive away, a day's drive away. That's all big deal in order to keep the young kids busy. There's nothing. You can't enjoy yourself like this, you know. Okay, this is what June wanted in the beginning, but so I had to bring up. This is just a few of the stones in the collection that Danny had. This one's Mayan. We were cultivating. I was sitting on Old Joe, and we were cultivating that cornfield. You go down, you drive directly across the traffic circle to where the kid, that little school is. And that field there, you know, going, oh, Mark, he picked up an arrowhead and he showed it to me, and he said, I was so enthralled with that thing. He said, put it in your pocket. So I did. And these are just other stones in his, this is Balance Rock up on the hill, Freddie Wheeler's farm. See, that's up, this is way down here, and that's up on Wheeler Hill there. And that's an aerial view of it. I worked, and again, I was fortunate enough, I mean, I must have been the 7th grade. We were in a new school. And after school, I'd pedal my bike up the Wheeler Hill, help Fred do the milking. And by the time it was done, it was dark. And I could hop on my bike, go all the way down through town to South Berlin, down across from where Village Power was. Not 2 or 3 cars would pass me, pitch dark. It was just, you know, that's the difference, how nice it was. There's Fred and Buddy. I talked to Shane this morning, and he thinks that Buddy, that's his father, he thinks he's probably 16 or 17 in that picture. And there's Fred. How many knew Fred? All I could think of him, he wore dungarees and a white t-shirt. And all I could think of was little Abner. This guy, he was so powerful. I'd see he'd go on, be picking up hay, pick up a bale, he'd grab one hand, he'd whoop up on the truck, and he'd go, and he'd keep going. It's just a strong son of a gun. One time there was an auction going on here. The place was crowded out front. He had heifers, he'd pasture them down in the corner field down here, Pleasant Street. And he had a young bull there, and he wanted to bring them back up. We'd herd the cows down through town and let them, you know, the heifers. So the auction's going, he's leading this frisky bull up, and the bull's running around. He's got it on the thing, and he's kicking it. And the bull takes off, and he planted his feet and yanked it, and the bull did a flip. Landed on its horn, broke the horn off. And those of you, and there are not many of you, but those of you who ever cut a horn off a cow, so the blood's going, the auction's going on. People all grab the bull, up the hill he goes with the bull. And I tell you, he could have carried it if he wanted, but he was a rugged son of a gun. Good guy, I liked him. There he is a few years later. And there's Buddy. He looks in his 20s there. That's George Estabrook. And I don't know who that young guy is. There's just some farm pictures. It's Fred, wagon, kids. I kind of like this picture because it was before the addition was added on. This was the original milk room. But we'd herd the cows in here. This was the milking in here. And we'd put hay and stuff up in the barn. And I don't know, that might be Fred there. There's Buddy with a calf. Now there's a good farm picture. Is that a Jersey or a Guernsey, Skip? Jersey. Guernsey calf. Yeah. There's Buddy picking hay out of the wagon. There's Buddy showing us one of his cows, prize cows, and that's up back. See, there's all these walls now, all lined with brush. You can't even see the wall. It's all grown in. There's another shot of the barn. That's really what most farms were like. I mean, they were working farms, and they worked. And that's Shane. That Buddy's son. I was talking to him this morning. That's just a shot of the building there, okay. This is Indian Head Farm, as I knew it. It's now Cordelia's farm. And I can remember this barn, Pleasant Street is right here. And the cemetery is down beyond the barn. And the distance between the wall and the street and the barn, I recall you could hardly drive a vehicle through it. It was so close to the road. And this was the big hay barn. I think I was in Nova Scotia fishing or something, but I wasn't here when it burned. But in my understanding, a bale of hay busted the...
A bale of hay went off the backside and broke off
a bulb.
A bulb, electric bulb.
Electric bulb in that. Yeah.
On fire.
This was right on the street looking at the big houses to the right and the stands over here. That's looking, that building, the foundation, the stone foundation is there, but that building's gone. The building to the left is still there, and this door and everything is still there. This is just a scene, somebody driving cattle up the wall. In fact, this is the foundation for that building I was just talking about. Here's the foundation for it. field scene. This was the back side of the barn. I remember this was a milk barn, and these were the silos. And as a kid, one of my jobs, you had to get up in the silo. They had a case tractor and a long belt, you know, and they'd chop and blow corn up a chute into the silo, and you had to empty it down feeding the cow, and then I'd have to go back and get more insulage. Well, see this ramp right here? I'd get back here and I'd run with that guy, just about get up over the edge. And then I could go and fill it up again, climb up in here, shovel down, and anyway, that was farming. That's Bill, I think.
That's
Pay attention, will you?
that's Tim.
That's Tim, okay, Tim. Now, this isn't a farm picture, but that's Bill, and his son admiring him. That's obviously down in Memorial Hall, but Bill, another, like Danny Tyler, an intellectual farmer. There he is on his old case. I don't know what year that case is, but he's had that a long time.
More wisdom in that man's head
Yeah.
than this whole town currently possesses.
Yeah, he's a good guy. There's 3 generations there. All right. What do we have here? Rainville.
Yeah.
Rainville's up on the top of Linden Street, and that's the area. The Conservation Commission is 100% focused on protecting that farm, and the Rainville family all seem to want to do it except one, but they're still working on all the deeds and the wills, and 10 years ago it had moved forward. Unfortunately, a couple of them died. Lenny died, and others inherited it, so it made so we're still trying to straighten out the paperwork. Unfortunately, they tore this all down. I don't even know any regrets doing it. That was the original barn. I remember coming home from Hudson, up Central Street, way down Central Street, and there was a glow in the air, in the sky, and that barn was burning. That was, so I had a license, so, you know, it was in the 60s sometime. That's just a field down view. I took these photos. The only photos of livestock really in town. I was up there one day with Lenny and took some pictures. Now there's Lenny. He was the last commercial dairy farmer in Berlin. He sold milk in 2017, sold his cows in 2018. And that's the end of dairy farming in Berlin. That's the end of it. That's Roseberry. You know, I talk about all these 23 dairy farms. Well, the biggest and the most scientifically and commercially run, professionally run, was Freddie Wheeler's farm up there, Balance Rock. Buddy, particularly when Buddy took it over, but they were into real. At one time they had over 200 livestock. I read 230, over 100 of which they milked at one time. You had to keep rotating things. Excuse me. And then you had other farms, like I was talking to Skip Sawyer this morning, and I know they had a dairy farm, but their dairy farm, they had like 7 cows. They milked them by hand, put them in jugs, and Myron Small, that was a dairy. When you go down by the town offices, you go, you know, down 60, you go through that downtown office, immediately on the left there, if you head down South Street, that place on the left, Myron Small lived there, and it was Small's Dairy. And he would go around and pick up milk from these small farms. And that's what he did. He'd pick up, you know, whatever a few quarts was from Sawyer's and others. But then you'd had the Bill Wheeler and the Rainvilles and the Freddie Wheelers and the Reese farm and the real commercial farm. So that, when I speak of agriculture, you know, that's the old, I can remember that just like that. They moved here in 46. That's when my folks moved to Berlin. I was 4. And then Joe, I can remember these mules, and I don't know if that's Alphonse and that's young Joe, Paul, or whoever it is, but they're hauling it, it's sitting on a log, and Joe's hauling a log. And as I understand it, Joe, they came from Ontario, and he apparently was a mule skinner in the logging camps in the big woods of Ontario, so when he was in Canada. So he preferred mules over horses. There's the family. One of these, I think, is Mary Ann, One of them is Lucy. That might be Joe. Probably Al up on the mule. There's Joe and Paul, or the Al said it isn't him, it's Paul or young Joe, one or the other. I don't know. Yeah, he preferred mowing with horses than tractors. And I'm talking the 50s and 60s, you know. This is, the Skip and I and some of us here had the great fortune of living in that area back before it completely went. So it went from that to all kinds of equipment and everything else. Then corporate farming came in out in the west and drove New England agriculture right out, plus land values went up. Now this is interesting. No Joe standing by this corn. Well, that picture went with this advertising. This was in the 1955, and this chemical company or fertilizer company approached Joe, convinced him, well, do it, blah, blah, blah. So this is an ad. Read this. He first came to the farm, he got 30 tons of hay, fair quality. After fertilizer, he got 60 tons. So that was all an advertisement. And I don't know where that advertisement went, but that was an advertisement for, there's some cattle out in the field. Louise said that's the most gentle draft horse he ever was. I remember the barn. And there's Joe and a couple of mules with a tip cart, and that guy's a DP. Anybody know what a DP is? Displaced person. And I don't know what the definition of, but Louise said there were 3 in town. One of them was with Joe, and then there were a couple other farms, whether that was an immigrant from a wartime or whether it was, I don't know, but they were called displaced persons. I spent many, many days on one of these dump rakes. All those fields down across from Spooky World, back and forth, picking up the scattering, dumping it, and I loved it. I really enjoyed using the horses. There's Joe. Is that a cut down, Skip?
Yes, I owned that tractor for a while.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
Now, what was it made out of?
GMC truck.
GMC truck. And did it have a power takeoff on it?
Did it have a what?
Power takeoff.
No, not that I recall.
Louise said that he built one that had a power takeoff. A
I
power
did
takeoff
not have that
had a wheel on it turned, and what they did, they had belts that wide and from here along as the room, and it went on whatever the corn grinder was. But Joe built that.
one. I'm taking me back to my years, Walter.
And now this is, I like this one. It's a 3 hitch up. He's got a horse and 2 mules. It's a 3-animal team pulling a manure spreader. I have a picture of Spiefogel with 3 horses pulling a hay wagon up Linden Street. But this is the only other 3 hitch up I've ever seen. Okay, this is the Neitzel farm. Johnny Neitzel. Now, pay attention to this. See this picture? You're going down. You're going over to Clinton Dam, up Boylston Road. Now, this was Boylston Road. It went up like this. It was probably 80, 90, 95, something like that. And this is looking the other way, coming right up close to the barn, the house.
Yeah.
This is 1903. Now, this is Rattlesnake Hill.
Zoom in.
And over the other side, they were putting in, building the Wachusett Dam on the Nashua River to make the Wachusett Reservoir. So the railroad, which used to, from the 5 corners, go all around Rattlesnake Hill. As you can see, you don't see any railroad yet, but so they just built this
That's the bridge.
overpass, and it's still there. You drive up, you still see that.
The abutments are there, the bridges.
Yep, yep. Boy, a lot of trucks got whacked on that bridge going underneath it, you know, and there was an accident there one time. 3 or 4 friends of mine from Clinton got killed there. They were going racing down around there. But anyway, so instead of the road going down over here, which in the previous pictures you saw, they brought it over, it comes down around with a sharp corner under the road and then a sharp to the right and went out over there. But now
the railroad line ran right across the front lawn of the house.
Yep, right. Oh, this is, well, this is John Neitzel Plus. He loved horses. He I can remember the first time I ever saw him. We were coming to Berlin, we hadn't moved here yet. My father had a 33 Plymouth, he was an electrician, it was one of those square backs one, and us three kids are sitting in the back of it up on some boxes of electrical equipment. And John Lisa was mowing the meadow. You go around the road through Spooky World, down around the corner, and it drops off where there's houses there. And he was mowing the side hill with a team of horses. My father must have known him, so he stopped, and I don't know, yelled, and they're talking back and forth, and I'm looking, and I was just so amazed at this guy with those horses. He seemed like such a nice guy, and he would have been so young then, of course. But
He tried to get me to marry his daughter Patty.
she lucked out.
You have no idea how lucky she was.
Yes, we do.
This picture here, some kid had these horses and he used them for pulling horses at fairs and stuff. So I don't know, he related to John somehow or just a friend. But anyway, he kept the horses up at John's. And John would hook them to a stone bolt and he exercised them. Him and my two kids were just little, and we got on that stone bolt and John took us around up over Rattlesnake Hill through the woods and down around. But anyway, the guy would come and the guy would practice with him. Well, he had a little whip and he'd just touch him a little bit. No. John made him get the horses out of there. John Neitzel never touched the horse. Never even slapped him with reins. You know, he just did it with love and affection. He got the most out of a horse you could ever imagine, but he wouldn't tolerate that guy whipping those horses. Okay, this is Chedco Farms. All of this green area here, which the town owns the development rights to, was Chedco Farms, owned by Charles Edward Cotting, Chedco. And he was a financier or something in Boston, multimillionaire, and owned all this. And all of that going up Brewer Road, all apple orchards, and the top he had prize dairy cattle. And it was just a beautiful place, meticulous. And he owned those houses as you go down Central Street, you get down there, you go past Sawyer Hill and you go down around the corner there and a bunch of houses and stuff, and there's kind of a messy place on the left. Well, Mr. Cotting owned all of that, and those places were meticulous, just beautiful. It was just a beautiful drive, and everything he had was marvelous. And
I was trained in dairy farming. And if you went in Chedco's main barn, all the woodwork in the barn was varnished.
Yep.
And it always was shiny.
That's right.
The inside of his cow barn was cleaner than many private homes that I went into.
Yeah. So,
amazing.
Another one, there were two, in those days, millionaires, they bought farms in different places. In Bolton, there was Waterquarter Hill there, and then down in Mr. Arthur, I don't know what he did for a living, but he owned all that land in South Berlin beyond Spooky World, all that big farm, the 1790 farm. I don't know what he was, but anyway, he had sheep and turkeys, and I don't know if he ever had dairy cattle or not, but another one of these guys, they bought places out in the country, and that's where they retreated. Today they have places in Florida they fly to and houses and everything, but in those days, the thing was they went out and they bought, and every town around here had Bolton, Sterling, there was one or two of these stupendous farms. That's his dairy. He had Guernseys, and Skip was saying that the inside of the barn was meticulous. And Gordon Acker worked for him, and they milked the cows by hand at first. I think they went to machines after a while, but they milked by hand. And if the cow was turned around, I don't know if you know, there's no tails, they washed the tails. It looked like silk. They were so clean. They kept them clean and milked by hand, and they were prized Guernsey cows.
They held national records.
Yeah. Here's Chedco Farm, 1982 entry for best 3 females. And that was that. What do I got here? Anything? Okay, this is the old McGrail place with the Lyman School.
Yeah.
You go down by the town offices, go up Linden Street, Lyman goes to the left, and then that area in there, that is, Skip will tell you, and a lot of people, they were just beautiful building, beautiful house, beautiful barn, open land, owned by, from I think 1904 to 1942, it was owned by the state, and it was a Lyman school for boys, bad boys. Oh, they weren't good, let me put them that way. And I knew people that, you know, played with them and
You
everything.
want to stay out of it.
Yeah. They tried to, Skip was a little too late to be enrolled. Should have been. Okay, this is the aerial view of it. This is Linden, and this is Lyman, and this is Crosby. No, that's the aqueduct there. You go up here. But I remember all this wide open, yeah. Cattle there, and Harold Martin farmed it for a while. He rented here, McGrail owned it and rented it to Harold, and Harold had a dairy farm there. And I remember when they planted apple trees up in this place. Now it's just all grown up.
Where's the little pond there that we used to go ice skating on?
It's right there.
Dudley Pond.
Dudley Pond, Horseshoe Pond. There it is, right
Yeah,
up
right
there.
there, okay, that
Yeah.
was quite a hike at 0 degrees off on
That's right.
Linden Street to get in there.
Yeah, but we were tough, Skip. No, they
You have no
don't
idea how tough we
do,
were.
we were,
Hey, Walter, I'd like to mention that we bought our tractor from the auction, from their John Deere A 1936.
from McGrail's.
Rails.
Oh, yeah,
Moved it across the street
Yeah.
to Stone's property to cut the hay there.
yep. So this is, and I recall this, and I'm looking at that truck, that looks like it's in the 40s, maybe 50s. So this isn't too old, this might be up in the 60s, this picture. But it just shows how quickly, you look at the open land here and you go up there today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not good. And it's just another picture of the house, that beautiful house. Matter of fact, Gail and I almost bought it. We were gonna buy that in 10 acres of land, we were up 300,000 or 400,000 tall, and the guy seemed all right. And then I drove up there one day and a big loader, they had unloaded a huge excavator and it had turned around and just wiped off the back of that house. So a guy had bought it to speculate with. And I called him up and I said, you know, I thought we were talking, he said, well, he said, I didn't like it, I didn't think it would be a good entry to an upscale development. That wasn't upscale enough for him. He wanted to put in yuppie McMansions, and he didn't think that this old place would add to it, you know? I mean, it's just an idea of people's values, you know, that's where we are. Okay, listen, thanks for your attention, and Marty, give Marty another round of applause.